It's confirmed. The commentary mold does not accommodate Atlas. Pay attention, everyone. Confirmation from science. Measurements and recent observations are converging toward an unsettling and clear conclusion. Atlas is not, in fact, a comet. Amateur, ground-based observations, composition analyses, X-ray detections, spectra, juice probe images, and Hubble images create a dossier that piece by piece dismantles the comet hypothesis that's conventional. This isn't speculation. It's an evidence body demanding reclassification immediately. Let's get to the point straight away. If you anticipated more of the same diffuse jets, a dense coma, icy dust, prepare yourself for the opposite. Atlas exhibits morphology resembling manufactured objects, acceleration defying pure gravity, unparalleled optical polarization, an anomalous metallic composition featuring excess nickel, a rigid forward jet, and self-generated energy emission. Yes, strong words these are, but dramatization isn't how science works. Evidence is how it works. And in the same direction, the evidence now points. What's new? Data and images that everything changed. Within weeks, we obtained measurements and decisive images. The JUICE probe's navigation camera and scientific instruments captured the object during the approach in early November 2025. On November 30th, 2025, Hubble re-observed Atlas, releasing an image post-perihelion that shows an antitail, pointing toward our solar system's central star and a drop-shaped coma. Avi Loeb noted, analyzing these images, that the predicted separation of an object swarm detaching from the nucleus perfectly matches the anti-solar extensia, separation of approximately 60,000 kilometers. Meanwhile, from observers in Namibia and other locations, ground-based images revealed jets that were defined, including one forward projected jet with coloration that's distinct. In contrast, recently published frames of processed Hubble image versions show artifacts near the nucleus. A square outline raising image handling questions, but discounting processing uncertainties even. The observational pattern generally is consistent. Like a classic ice comet, Atlas does not behave. Physical evidence dismantling the comet hypothesis. Here's the list of physical incompatibilities rendering the comet explanation, when taken together, unsustainable. In sequence, each item will be explained. X-ray antitail and rigid forward jet pointing toward the star. Tail and weak coma. Material visible. Little. Composition, anomalously, metallic. Nickel ratio compared to iron, far too high. Optical polarization, strongly negative. Acceleration, non-gravitational without debris visible and sufficient. Mass loss, minimal, incompatible with jets so extensive. Signatures of rotation and elongation inconsistent with an icy nucleus that's fractured, with passers by Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. Repeated orbital coincidences. Brightness variations, unusual in sequence and tint, that's bluish. Over millions of kilometers, jets columnated, with the nucleus's size estimated, energy requirements incompatible. First point, at Atlas's position, X-ray detection. Not simply reflected light from our solar system's central star X, self-generated energy emission, they represent. To produce X-rays consistently, a comet would need gas expelled in massive amounts that, interacting with charged particles and stellar wind, would generate such radiation, the exact opposite of what in Atlas we see, which minimally active and extremely dry appears. Second point, composition. A nickel to iron ratio on the order of 10:1 in the metallic fraction observed. Studies indicate something to industrial alloys closer than to the composition of a typical comet nucleus, which refractory grains and volatiles dominate with proportions very different. This chemical signature alone, many red flags raises. Third point, morphology. Projecting forward with jets columnated and a frontal structure rigid. A well-defined antitail does not fit volatile material ejection that's diffuse. Jets natural tend to disperse, and compositions and colors similar show when from the same source originating. In Atlas, jets with tones differing, we see a sign of heterogeneity, hard to reconcile with a nucleus icy and homogeneous. Fourth point, acceleration, velocity changes, not by gravity alone, explained. Measurements indicate, in models of comets, from volatile sublimation non-gravitational accelerations arise, thrust creating, but this mass loss requires, and a debris cloud visible. In Atlas, acceleration without a cloud, sufficient to the magnitude of change justify we have, meaning to explain the effect, not enough mass visible there is. Fifth point, the energy involved. This extensive and collimated jets would require mass fluxes and an area of absorption, far exceeding what a nucleus Atlas-sized could support if just ice it were. Speaking practically, the velocity of ejection observed and the amount of material would require mechanisms of propulsion or energy sources that with standard comet physics do not align. The evidence definitive, the anomalies some important alternative explanations a single isolated point might have. But when anomalies, accumulate orbital coincidences, behavior phototetric irregular, acceleration unexplained, polarization negative, jets forward, nickel excess X-rays. The picture changes, that by a combination of natural causes, ordinary all of this can be explained. The likelihood drops dramatically. The convergence of these signals precisely is what scientific confirmation constitutes. Scientists conservative who hypothesis radical, initially dismissed, have begun admitting that no longer simply a comet is the explanation most plausible. Not opinion, this is two empirical observations. A rational response, it is. The hypothesis of mini-probes, the scenario fitting the data. Among hypotheses proposed, for its ability to reconcile anomalies, different one stands out: the release from a primary body of multiple objects, reflectors, scouts, mini-probes, that near perihelion, a swarm of objects macroscopic and non-volatile released could produce the luminous trail anti-solar, observed exactly. Modeling and calculations show, aligned, numerous reflectors too, at a distance appear as a streak, continuous dot. How this the data matches. Here's the anti-tail pointing toward our solar system's central star. A set of reflectors produces two stellar gravity. Lighter particles and objects respond differently. The acceleration non-gravitational observed, explaining the color differences between structures expelled and the jets columnated. Many reflectors and probes naturally explain, if of metallic alloy nickel-rich part of the material consists, the spectral signatures unusual. This explains. Moreover, predictions testable. This hypothesis generates of science a requirement fundamental. If with the release of many probes, the antitail is associated with orbital delivery events, its visibility should vary. Around December 19, 2025. A drastic drop in visibility, observers modeled, with the end of a delivery to Mars match and near the Jupiter encounter predicted for March 16, 2026. A resurgence with the hypothesis reinforce. Predictions observable and clear. These are science in action. To this puzzle, what lobe contributed? The images and data, preliminary analyzing, a vibe presented an interpretation that with the swarm object idea aligns. That in images, post-perihelion, the drop-shaped coma, the predicted separation between Atlas and fragments larger of a set matches, he highlighted, around 60,000 kilometers. A separation exactly the antitail's length in the November 30, 2025 Hubble observation, to the preliminary JUICE image from November 2, 2025. Lobe also pointed, hints of two tails and a halo showing. Shortly before the probe's closest approach to Atlas, these images were taken, and data spectral and particle and composition. JUICE's instruments promise that the presence of material macroscopic detached could confirm or refute natural alternatives. Considering planetary fragment exomoon. Before, two conclusions, bold jumping, the natural alternatives. Let's examine the scientific community has considered. Exomoon from an exoplanet torn a moon. Possible, theoretically, but a history would require that for billions of years survival allows, and for the jet activity, observed a mechanism. With the typical exomoon, the X-ray emission and metallic composition do not align. Planetary fragment of planet's chunk, could in principle metal content. High show. However, the combination of acceleration, non-gravitational and X-ray emission, and jets, directed without a cloud visible, remains, in this scenario, unexplained. Comet, depleted. Extremely weak the favorite, initial, but the near absence of water around 4%. The polarization, extreme, the nickel proportion, anomalous, and the energy self-emitted. This hypothesis increasingly unlikely make. In summary, the full anomaly set none of the natural alternatives comfortably explains. And in science, an invitation that is to consider hypotheses that previously without serious analysis were dismissed. Recap essential. The anomalies of Atlas. Before forward moving, to establish an overview complete it's crucial. Here, the 12 anomalies central associated with Atlas era set, so consistent that together taken, the category of a natural comet, it simply does not fit. With the ecliptic plane aligned, a retrograde trajectory. For an interstellar object, statistically improbable, which angles chaotic and dispersed normally would display directly toward our solar system's central star-oriented jets. An antitail producing whose geometry by perspective alone cannot be resolved. With the history of interstellar visitors incompatible in apparent mass. A body more dense and compact, suggesting than should be a cometary nucleus. To Jupiter and Venus and Mars. Successive approaches of a sequenza chain orbital extremely unlikely, without some factor additional, the path influencing. With concentrations far exceeding those in traditional comets observed, an anomalous plume with water extremely little only, about 4% gas emissions, at odds completely with composition typical of comets. With behavior phototric, rare difficult to fit into the catalog of objects natural known, polarization, optical intensely negative, in the same region associated with the famous WOW signal, an apparent origin a coincidence even to those who explanations unconventional reject, unsettling, by a tint bluish unusual accompanied, a brightness increase sudden, stronger than the star reference used in the observations, an area of solar absorption far larger than the size of nucleus estimated requiring jets, a deep imbalance energy exposing around 13% of its mass losing would imply an acceleration non-gravitational without any cloud visible such material ejection to justify. For millions of kilometers stable remaining without from an irregular nucleus rotating expected distortions, jets columnated surprisingly, clearly, and directly. To summarize, today, available, the evidence, scientific forms an argument robust that a comet, in the classical sense, Atlas is not. The combination of patterns, morphological and acceleration, non-gravitational and anti-tail forward, and composition, metallic anomalous and emission, X-ray is not with models conventional of comets compatible. Everything this does not solve. From it, far, but certainty, absolute science does not demand, between observation and theory, coherence it demands. And right now, the revaluation of Atlas's nature, coherence favors, and the investigation of hypothesis alternative, including of non-volatile material, the possibility, and structures ejected that function technological might have. Now the approach best is cautious and scientific. Compare, and measure, and observe. For upcoming orbital passes, clear predictions the mini-probe hypothesis provides. If the observations match, in understanding, we will have a leap qualitative of this evidence. What do you think? Convincing enough, the readings I presented seem to as something beyond a comet-treat atlas. In the comments, leave your theory, the video share, and if yet you haven't, to the channel, subscribe. To keep this investigation alive, comment and share. The next JUICE data releases, let's follow and Hubble analyzes. Because only beginning is the Atlas story, and the observations upcoming may confirm definitively, Atlas is not a comet.